When we think of a haunted house, we imagine a place where the dead refuse to leave, where the walls seem to echo with the lives and deaths of those long gone. Around the world, there are countless homes that claim to hold such ghostly apparitions, but in this video, we're focusing on 5 infamous places where the dead truly never left. Our first stop is the Monte Cristo Homestead in Junee, Australia, a place burdened by a murky history since it was built in 1885. The Crawley family, its original owners, witnessed a string of untimely deaths on the property. A maid allegedly plummeted from the balcony, a stable boy burned alive in a freak accident, and a young woman fell, or was pushed, down the grand staircase. But perhaps the darkest tale is that of Harold, a mentally ill man chained in a caretaker's cottage for 40 years, discovered curled next to the lifeless body of his mother. He was sent to a mental institution, where he died shortly after. Even after the Crawleys abandoned the homestead in 1948, the tragedies didn't stop. One caretaker was found murdered on the property, and his killer was never caught. Visitors and new owners have since reported ghostly apparitions, unexplained lights, strange force fields, and disembodied sounds. Animal mutilations, too, have defied explanation. To this day, Monte Cristo is regarded as one of Australia's most haunted houses. In the quiet village of Borgvattnet in Sweden stands the Borgvattnet Vicarage. This house, perched on a remote hill 300 miles northwest of Stockholm, has gained a reputation that defies its quaint, peaceful surroundings. Thrill seekers and believers in the supernatural travel here from all corners of the world, drawn to the chilling history that lives within its walls. But be warned, visitors often leave with far more than they bargained for. Built in 1876, the old vicarage originally housed clergymen who tended to the local congregation. But by the early 20th century, the house had become known for something far less holy. Disturbing events began to surface, stories of spirits that wandered the halls, unsettling those who dared to stay overnight. Among these legends is the tale of the Grey Lady, the most famous of the vicarage's many ghosts. Some say she was once a housekeeper named Selma, who met a tragic end within these very walls. Her spirit, clad in gray, is said to appear suddenly, drifting through the rooms, her face barely visible. Guests have described her figure looming in windows, watching silently before fading into the shadows. But she's not the only presence lingering here. The sound of childish laughter, though there's no child in sight, has been heard echoing down the dark corridors. There are whispers of a young spirit playing tricks on visitors, tugging at their clothes, moving objects when no one's looking. The stories of these restless spirits have been passed down through generations, growing in both detail and dread. Seances, ghost hunters, and late-night vigils have only fueled the intrigue. Locals who once dismissed the legends now hesitate to step inside after dark. While the old vicarage is steeped in Swedish history, its walls witnessing decades of community life, religious services, and personal stories, it's the ghostly figures that have left the deepest mark. Even if you come for the history, the unexplained phenomena make it impossible to ignore the darker side of this house. It may be one of the most famous homes in the world, but few know of the ghostly inhabitants that share 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. The White House is steeped in history, but also its hauntings. It is said that Winston Churchill famously refused to sleep in the Lincoln bedroom after seeing the ghost of Abraham Lincoln sitting on the bed. Lincoln's apparition has been reported by numerous others, including Presidents Teddy Roosevelt, Herbert Hoover, and Dwight Eisenhower. Even First Ladies Jackie Kennedy and Lady Bird Johnson had their own encounters, as did Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands, who opened her door one night to find Lincoln standing in the hallway. He vanished right before her eyes. The Rose Room is believed to be haunted by the spirit of Andrew Jackson, whose ghostly laughter and furious outbursts have been heard by staff. Abigail Adams, too, has been seen, floating through the east room with her arms outstretched as if carrying laundry. Cold spots, disembodied footsteps, and unexplained knocks are all common occurrences in America's most famous residents. In London's upscale Mayfair district sits 50 Berkeley Square, often thought of as the most haunted house in the city, if not throughout the entire United Kingdom. Built in 1740, the four-story house was once home to George Canning, who briefly served as Prime Minister in 1827 before his death from pneumonia, just 119 days later. But it's the other residents and guests and their alleged experiences in the house that lead to tales of its haunted status. A man named Thomas Myers lived in the house from 1859 to 1874. Local rumor was that he had cloistered himself away after his proposal of marriage was rejected. Distraught, Myers locked himself inside the home, eventually succumbing to madness in his solitude and dying at the age of 76. But perhaps the most well-known story is associated with the attic room, which is said to be haunted by a young woman who had committed suicide there sometime in the 18th century. She is claimed to have thrown herself from the attic window to escape the abuses of a male family member. It's been said her spirit possesses the power to frighten visitors to death, often appearing as a brown mist or as a pale, ghostly figure. An 1879 article in Mayfair magazine stated that a newly hired maid at the home was driven mad after staying the night in the attic, dying in a mental asylum just a day later. There were further claims that in 1887, 2 sailors from the ship, the HMS Penelope, stayed in the home overnight, and that one of the men had died after tripping and falling while fleeing from a ghost. The apparition was described by the surviving sailor as the angry spirit of Thomas Myers. It's now been over 100 years since the last paranormal activity having been reported, and modern ghost hunters have come to believe that most, if not all, of the tales of morbid events or supernatural activity were simply invented, or perhaps the ghosts have simply moved on. For the residents of this tidy, tree-lined Belnor neighborhood, the haunting story that surrounds the home at 8435 Roanoke Drive may be their worst-kept secret. "Oh yeah, that's the house," confirms the next-door neighbor when asked if he's aware of the occult history of the 2-story brick colonial next door. "But all of that happened back in the 1940s, he adds. While that is true, the fact remains that the real-life story behind the best-selling novel The Exorcist had its origins in St. Louis. The story of The Exorcist is one nearly everyone knows, the 1973 horror classic that introduced the world to 12-year-old Reagan and the terrifying notion of demonic possession. Based on the novel by William Peter Blatty, the film cemented its place in pop culture and is often hailed as one of the most disturbing horror movies ever made. But while Blatty's novel served as the foundation, it was a real-life case that inspired the tale, a story far stranger and more unsettling than anything Hollywood could conjure. Legend tells of a disturbed 13-year-old boy who, in the late winter of 1949, traveled to St. Louis from suburban Washington, D.C. Convinced the child was possessed by the devil, Jesuit priests from St. Louis University performed a grueling month-long exorcism on the boy, at last freeing the teen from Satan's grasp in the psych ward at Alexian Brothers Hospital. Whether the child was actually possessed is still a matter of debate, but the fact that priests did perform the archaic ritual of the exorcism is not. Blatty used a diary kept by one of the exorcists as the basis of his 1971 book, which rode atop the bestseller lists for 54 weeks. When Blatty's seminal shocker hit theaters 2 years later, filmgoers across the nation threw up in the aisles and ran screaming from movie houses.
It just scared me to death. Things just like this, really scared me to death. I'm just nervous.
Are you going to go back in and see more of the movie now?
Probably, yeah.
But missing from almost all accounts is the mention of the St. Louis residence where the boy stayed prior to being moved to the rectory, and finally, the hospital. With both having been demolished decades ago, the home remains the last surviving landmark, a relic of one of the most chilling true stories in American paranormal history. So there you have it, 5 homes where the ghosts and spirits have refused to rest. What do you think explains these chilling events? Let us know in the comments section below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.